Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to just hang around because I think what you are talking about is so important, and I think as you have complimented the committee, and I share that compliment, or I share your complimentary statements with the chairman, I think we have a great panel here. And so just to kind of begin it, from everything that I've read in your testimony and what you presented here, would you say that the focus that we have put kind of at this point solely on the Refugee Resettlement Program is perhaps misplaced, and it has diverted attention from much more critical security issues that we have? Is that, it seems to be unanimous on the panel. Just let the record reflect everyone's nodding their head. If you disagree, please weigh in. And obviously you represent a great cross-section of national security experts. Would you say that your view is kind of the majority view of people who study national security? And so you guys almost talk to each other at some point here. Can you tell me, building on what the chairman has asked, what things you think we're missing that we haven't talked about today? Obviously, the visa waiver program is on everyone's mind. Along with Senator Feinstein, we're introducing a bill to address what we see as gaps. She's been on this for a long time. Obviously, it's much more timely now, so it'll be a great bipartisan bill. We expect we're going to have a discussion on it. But what are we missing that people within your expertise today are saying, wow, why don't they get this? And that's for anyone.
One of the key things I'd recommend, and I agree with Peter entirely about the greatest threat in terms of terrorists entering the U.S. being the Schengen zone and visa waiver. I think the key thing for me is in the past, because of the Schengen Agreement, there's certain information that the United States does not get from European allies because of that agreement. Over the course of the past several months, we've seen the virtual collapse of the Schengen Agreement, which means that our own leverage with our European allies is at an all-time high. So I would strongly recommend senators to talk to U.S. Customs and Border Protection to figure out what they need, what information they need from Europeans, and where Schengen in the past has posed a threat to U.S. border security, to see what we might be able to do in bilateral or multilateral negotiations with our European allies.
Other things that we've missed.
Well, I'll tell you something that's gone right, which is if you look at ISIS propaganda, they are very concerned about Turkey now, because the pressure on the Turks has really reduced or at least impacted the foreign fighter flow. So any encouragement and/or expertise or aid we can give to Turks to increase their custom border patrol, it would be very useful, because that's where overwhelmingly the foreign fighters are coming in.
Let me add to a comment by David in terms of both putting pressure on Europeans but assisting them as well. This is probably going to be more emphasis on bilateral agreements than on multilateral. There are profound differences in Europe, policy differences, even philosophical differences about how to deal with these issues, about intelligence issues, about privacy issues, about resettlement issues, about returning foreign fighters, whether they should be charged with criminal violations or whether they should be rehabilitated and put back into society. When you deal with that many differences in a group like the European Union, it tends to dilute the efforts down to sort of the least common denominator. And so we really have to work closely on a bilateral basis to ensure that we are getting the information that we need for our own national security interests.
Go ahead.
I would just make 4 very brief points, and they're a little bit disjointed since we've been talking about a lot of different issues. First, I think support for frontline states is absolutely critical. I was part of a letter from 22 former officials, including Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz and former Undersecretary for Policy Michelle Flournoy and others, urging an additional allocation of up to $2 billion in large measure to support Jordan and Turkey, because they are experiencing such significant challenges that would be a very valuable symbol of solidarity and support. My second comment is I agree with the other panelists that the refugee program is not anywhere near the major threat. My third of fourth points is that I agree that we need to take a very close look at the visa waiver program and other programs, but I also think that we have to accept the fact or understand the fact, without prejudice to that point about looking at the visa waiver program, we have to accept the fact that our strength is also our vulnerability. I mean, our system of immigration is responsible for creating, a superpower. Without the kind of immigration policies that we've had over the past century or more, the United States would not have achieved the kind of economic and political dominance that we have in the world. And we have been spared some of the very challenging, dramatically challenging existential challenges that some of our European allies and Japan face. That is our strength, but it is also our vulnerability.
Senator, I think the greatest risk is that we allow our political discourse and climate in the United States to make it acceptable to be anti-refugee, anti-immigrant, to say things that are negative and stereotypical of people, whereby the mainstream population thinks it's okay to turn our backs on newcomers. I think when you look at Europe, you can see the sort of social isolation that a lot of their immigrant communities live with day to day. And the strength of America, the beauty of America, is that we don't do that, that our values and our ability to assimilate, and I'll use that old-fashioned word, we do in fact assimilate new people. By the second and third generation, they usually can't speak their grandparents' or parents' language. When people are willing to share our values of freedom and individuality and acceptance and incorporation, they become Americans. And we native-born people look at them at some point and go, oh, they're American. I don't know when that shift takes place, but it takes place. And that ability to incorporate keeps us from having that group that may turn on us internally. And so we have to keep that political discourse and the leadership to say to the American people, and it's not easy because people are different and people don't like different and it makes everybody uneasy, but it's the political leadership that have to keep the dialogue in that positive way that reinforces the beauty and strength of America.